When I was 16, I embarked on my first solo journey to a foreign country. But unlike most travelers, I wasn't just navigating unfamiliar cities or new languages. I was navigating a world that didn't know or understand my language. As a deaf person, I communicate through sign language, and on that first trip, I realized how invisible my way of communicating could be. That experience was just an example of the many things that happened. Today, I want you to take you on a journey, not just across the 63 countries I visited, but into the heart of what it truly means to travel as a deaf individual. Traveling as a deaf person comes with some serious perks. While everyone else at the hostel is tossing and turning because of noisy roommates or late night parties, I'm over here sleeping like a baby. Total silence, bliss. And when I find myself in small villages where nobody speaks English, guess who's suddenly the communication expert? Me. While everyone's struggling with Google Translate, I'm out there having full-on conversations with the locals using body language. No common language, no problem. And let's be honest, I never have to deal with screaming babies on flights. It's so peaceful. But while traveling as a deaf person definitely has its advantages, it also comes with some serious challenges. Traveling is challenging for everyone. It's happened to all of us to have planned a trip and then something goes wrong. But for deaf people, access to information while traveling isn't always so simple. Let me give you some examples. Once I arrived early at the airport, passed through security, checked my gate on the screen, and sat down to wait. I kept checking on the screen, and everything seemed fine. But after a while, I noticed people starting to move. I didn't know why. It wasn't until much later that I realized my gate had been changed through an audio announcement. How could I have known? I rushed to the new gate, but by the time I got there, boarding had closed. I explained my situation, but they wouldn't let me through. I missed my flight and ended up stranded at the airport. And it's not just airports. This happens on trains too. Platform changes are often announced over the loudspeaker, but if the screens don't update, I miss my train. These situations forced me to rearrange my entire trip, adding extra stress and frustration. These kinds of barriers give just a small glimpse into what deaf travelers face. While everyone encounters travel issues, deaf individuals miss out on key information that most people take for granted. Even when accessibility is available in places like airports, it's often a one-size-fits-all solution and not tailored to different types of needs. Whenever I informed the staff that I'm deaf, they would send an assistant with a wheelchair to escort me. While this is incredibly helpful for those with mobility issues, it's not the kind of support deaf people need. We can't truly work towards accessibility unless we recognize and accommodate for different needs. Achieving accessibility doesn't always require complex solutions. Simple measures like training staff in basic international sign, teaching effective communication methods such as writing, updating information in real time on screens, apps, and websites, and having information on the screen in sign languages. These additions can easily bridge the gap. Even a chat feature on airport apps or websites would allow deaf passengers to communicate directly with assistants when needed. These straightforward solutions would break down communication barriers and greatly improve the travel experience for deaf travelers. The barriers that exist are the reflection of how society often views deaf people. I proudly see myself as part of a vibrant community with rich cultures and unique languages. But the more I've traveled, the more I've realized that this is not how society sees me. I've had people ask, how is it possible that you're able to travel? Or do you need an assistant or sign language interpreter to get around? These questions are not just curious questions. We navigate the world with resilience. Without hearing assistance is not only limiting, but also disempowering. It's time for society to challenge these stereotypes and recognize that deaf people are more than capable of living fully independent and successful lives. Traveling has taught me how to break down communication barriers. I've realized that while people are curious, they're often unsure how to connect with me. So I started initiating conversations, showing how easy it is to communicate through writing or body language. Many were surprised at how simple bridging the gap could be. I've met travelers who went out of their way to include me, some even learning the International Sign Alphabet in just 1 hour to make me feel included. Deaf people love to connect with others. We are not shy or isolated. We are curious, open, and social. The traveling community has shown me that with a little effort and willingness, anyone can make deaf people feel included. These experiences have led to lasting friendships and helped me see that meaningful connections are possible when people take the time to understand and engage. I've realized that accessibility is more than just having a sign language interpreter or captioning. It's about understanding that the way society is designed often excludes us, whether through inaccessible public spaces, a lack of awareness about deaf culture, or everyday assumptions about communication. These barriers limit our full participation in the world. But if we start to shift our perspective and see accessibility as a universal need rather than a niche issue, we can create a world that welcomes diversity in all of its forms. What we need is empathy and understanding that difference isn't a deficit. By embracing diversity, we enrich our communities, opening up opportunities for innovation, creativity, and growth. Imagine a world where every person, regardless of their abilities, feels heard, valued, and included. That's the world I'm advocating for, and I believe that together we can build it. The next time you encounter someone with a difference in their experience or challenge, I encourage you to pause and think, how can we make this world more inclusive for everyone? It starts with understanding, and from there, meaningful change can happen. But so much more must be done by institutions, companies, and infrastructure when it comes to accessibility for traveling. Recently, I set a new goal to visit Antarctica next year. At first, many tour companies rejected me because of my deafness. Some didn't even make the effort to find accessibility solutions to make their tours more inclusive. One company even came back to me saying, "Good news, we have found a solution for you." I was beyond excited, thinking, wow, they've really made an effort. But then they said, "You can sit at the front and read lips." This is not accessibility. This is forcing deaf people to adapt to the hearing world rather than the other way around. Studies on lip reading and audiovisual speech perception show that even the most skilled lip readers can only understand about 30 to 40% of spoken words under ideal conditions. So this is not a solution. It's okay to not have all the answers or to be unaware of a particular issue, but in an era where information is easily accessible online, I urge people, companies, and tour operators to research and educate themselves, not to assume or expect deaf people to provide solutions to their lack of inclusivity. Anyway, I didn't give up. After a lot of effort, I finally found a company willing to make the trip accessible for me. They will send me all the safety protocols and meeting briefings in advance, provide onboard Wi-Fi, and set up a WhatsApp group so the crew can communicate with me during the trip. These are just a few examples of simple measures that can be easily implemented to break communication barriers. Hopefully, they will continue to adopt these practices for future deaf travelers. For me, it wasn't just about reaching Antarctica. It was about proving that with persistence, accessibility can be achieved. I often joke I had to break communication barriers before I could break the ice in Antarctica. I stand here today as a proud deaf traveler who has visited 63 countries. I carry my deaf identity as a source of strength, not limitation. Calling myself a deaf traveler is a statement of pride. It represents my journey of breaking down barriers and pushing past societal expectations. Being deaf isn't just a part of my identity. It's the lens through which I experience the world, from the challenges I face to the unexpected connections I make along the way. I want to leave you with a vision, a world where everyone, deaf or hearing, can connect, a world where barriers are replaced by shared understanding and a desire to communicate. This world is possible, but it starts with each of us. The changes needed aren't revolutionary. They're simple, everyday choices. It could be learning a few basic signs in your national sign language or an international sign. Being patient in conversations, especially when the method of communication is different from one that you use, is also important. If a deaf person is communicating with you by writing, don't roll your eyes or shrug your shoulders and walk away. Be patient and engage with them. There are more practical steps that you can take to advocate for better accessibility in public spaces. These can include pushing for captioning on videos and screens in waiting rooms, public events, museums, and exhibitions, so that deaf individuals can access critical information. Remember that deafness is only one part of who we are. Yes, we navigate the world differently, but we are more than our deafness. I'm a traveler, a lover of adventure, photography, sport, and exploring new cultures. And this is true for every deaf person you meet. We have interests and dreams and passions, just like everyone else. So when you meet a deaf person, there's much more to talk about than our deafness. For those of you who are hearing, I encourage you, don't shy away from what's different. Embrace it. Engage with deaf culture. Learn how we communicate and understand that connecting goes beyond spoken words. Your efforts, no matter how small, can make a huge difference. And for the deaf community, continue to share your stories, your talents, and your unique perspectives. We have so much to offer. And by sharing our strengths, we break down the walls that divide us. When you leave here today, I don't want you to simply remember this talk. I want you to think deeply about the message. I appreciate you've come to listen to me speak, but I don't need your admiration or sympathy. What I need is your action. Reflect on how each of us can make the world more accessible and inclusive, not just once, but every single day. Educate yourself and inform others. Don't expect deaf people to do it for you, and don't wait for the next occasion that you meet a deaf person to ask them questions about deaf culture or sign language. Do your research now. Learn some sign language so that the next time we meet, you can ask me about my last adventure, and we can bond over our favorite countries, culture, or food. Help create a world where everyone is included, where communication is a bridge, not a barrier. Thank you.